Please take a seat, and thank you very much for your comprehensive presentation. I'm using the opportunity before I open up to questions in the audience to show this map. And in one of our conversations, we talked about the North Atlantic Arctic corridor, which links Scotland, the Faroe Islands, Iceland, Greenland, and the United States through Maine. And we already have cargo shipping, airlines, all kinds of transport and economic activity linking these countries in the northern part. So let me ask you this. How ready is Scotland to engage almost aggressively with the Faroe Islands, Iceland, Greenland, the state of Maine in utilizing the potential of this extraordinary North Atlantic Arctic corridor of transport and communication?
The first thing I should probably clarify is that we don't intend to be aggressive as we do it, not in the traditional sense. But how ready are we? It's a good question. I think we are ready and willing. I think thanks in no small part to the Arctic Circle, we are much more ready and much more prepared than we were just 5 years ago. We see the massive opportunity and potential and mutual benefit that comes from this. So we, as I hope you can hear, very enthusiastic about making sure that we don't neglect our traditional partners and the traditional collaboration, but that we widen and shift the perspective of our horizons and look much more to the Arctic than we have done in years gone by.
Great. Okay, let's take the first question from here, and then we go to you.
James Gray, I'm a member of the UK Parliament. First Minister, thank you very much indeed for your speech, which was great, and for all the work you're doing with relations between Scotland and the Arctic countries. I think it's terrific, and I congratulate you and the government and officials in particular in your government for really superb work which you're doing. Just one detail. I'm delighted that the UK government has chosen to host COP26 in my hometown, my birthplace of Glasgow, and look forward to the great work which will be done there. Just one detailed question, if I may. It's 4 years ago now that you announced that you would nationalise the Scottish energy producers. I just wondered how the business plan for that's progressing, and also if you did indeed nationalise the Scottish energy producers, why that would help climate change.
Okay, I'm not sure you're entirely accurate in what how you characterise the commitment I made, but I'm happy to clarify and then answer your question. Firstly, thank you. It's good to see you here. I was just ran into one of my own Westminster colleagues, Brendan O'Hara, in the outer part of the summit. So it's good to see so many people here represented in these important discussions. 4 years ago, we made a commitment to not nationalise energy providers, but to establish a publicly owned energy company. Because of COVID and the changing issues around energy, we have amended that ambition. We're in the early stages of establishing a public energy agency to guide some of the decisions and investments and developments that we need to see over the period. So that work is important to us and will continue. I think it's also fair to say that we need to really think carefully about what's happening in the energy markets right now. In the UK, lots of volatility and lots of perhaps obviously occasioned by the spike in gas prices, but perhaps indicative of some of the real flaws and weaknesses in the UK energy market over recent years. So we are thinking carefully about that in terms of how we take these commitments forward in the future.
Okay, the questions here. Yes, can you bring the microphone? While we wait, the Arctic Circle is very proud to facilitate questioning from the members of the British Parliament to the First Minister of Scotland. Yeah, Marianne, please.
Yes. Are you willing to facilitate it in the opposite direction?
First Minister, I'm Marianne Coates. I'm the former EU ambassador for the Arctic. It's a pleasure to see you here again. I'm one of the big admirers of the Arctic Scottish policy, not at least because it's focused on innovative solutions and renewable energy. You spoke before and you said you had big gas and oil fields in the north. We had before here the EU Commissioner saying that the new EU Arctic policy wants to have oil and gas under the ground The minister from Greenland before spoke, also saying no exploitations of oil and gas in Greenland. So what is the position of Scotland regarding oil and gas, particularly in view that you will be hosting the COP26?
Sure. It's a really good question, and I've just been talking to the EU Commissioner as well. We are, I should say, just as a point of explanation, not as a way of dodging the question, I hasten to add, that decisions around licensing in the North Sea and permission to develop and to explore in the North Sea don't lie with my government, they lie with the UK government. So that's just an important point of context and clarity. Oil and gas is important to Scotland. It has been for a long time. There's lots of jobs and economic activity dependent on it. Our energy needs are still, to a large extent, catered for by it. But, and this is a but that even a country like Scotland cannot shy away from, we must move away from fossil fuels, not just as a country, but as a world, and we must accelerate the pace at which we are doing that. And therefore, I do think, and I've asked the Prime Minister in the UK to look again at the Campbell oil field that has a licence, has had a licence for many years, but is now looking for permission to develop that field. I don't think that should simply be nodded through. I think there should be really hard questions asked about whether new exploration is consistent with our climate obligations. These are tough questions for countries with big fossil fuel industries, but they cannot be ignored. They cannot be shied away from. And one of the reasons for that is that we tell ourselves we're in a transition, which we are, but if we continue to say and tell ourselves we can also keep exploring for new fossil fuels, do we really approach that transition with the speed and the urgency and the commitment and the finance behind it that we would otherwise do? So I have a real doubt that new exploration is consistent with our climate change obligations, and I think that's something the world, as many people are already telling us, really has to face up to.
Great. There's a question at the very back, if you can rush up to the last row. And I'm taking that, you have to run up the stairs to the last row. Yes. I'm taking that question to demonstrate anyone in the hall, even sitting as far back as possible, can put a question. Okay. Yes.
Hi, my name's Ellie Fisher. I'm an environmental science master's student here in Iceland, and I wanted to ask you, what do you think are the main challenges or barriers to international cooperation at COP16? And what do you believe is the sort of most pressing issue that could be addressed if we could collectively work together on that, if we could overcome the barriers to cooperation?
Thank you for the question. I think, I mean, there will be barriers to international cooperation and collaboration around COP that flow from the geopolitical situation and the barriers to cooperation that exist in other contexts. But I don't think there should be any barrier to cooperation in the COP context that can't be overcome if there is the political will to do so. And you know, this is not something that is or should be seen as optional. I absolutely understand there will be, probably particularly amongst the younger generation, a real sense of frustration as they see at COP what looks like a haggling and a negotiation between governments about what they are prepared to do and not prepared to do for something as fundamentally important as saving the planet. So there's got to be that will. We are running out of time. This is probably the last chance, and populations around the world have to be prepared to hold their governments to account for this, because it will be very obvious whether COP has succeeded in at least keeping 1.5 alive as something credible and deliverable, or it fails. There will be no hiding place for that, and I think there has to be a real understanding in these final days leading up to COP that that is the case. So I don't underestimate the challenge ahead. I think there are big, big obstacles to overcome, but the cost and the consequences of failing are massive. And I would say, and I know young people in Scotland, I think people of all ages in Scotland increasingly are ahead of even politicians that I think are on the right end of climate responsibility here, populations around the world have to really make clear to their leaders and their governments that they will not forgive them for failure.
Great. Before we go to the Foreign Minister of Denmark at the end of the session, let me take questions here. Yes. Yeah. Stand up. Yes, please.
Thank you, Mr. President. First Minister, I'm Rachel Johnstone, University of Akureyri and University of Greenland. My question for the First Minister refers to the right of climate activists to protest. We've seen rather heavy-handed physical force being used against activists around London. And I wonder how the Scottish Government intends to balance the right to peaceful protest with the obligation to provide security for the delegates.
It's a really important question, and Police Scotland, who are the police force that operationally are responsible for policing the event, have made very clear that their principal obligation is to facilitate peaceful protest, not to stop climate activists protesting. Clearly, there is an obligation to deliver a secure event and to look after the security of people. And we don't want key parts of the country brought to a halt and that kind of disruption. But it's not just important that people have the ability to protest. Going back to my earlier answer, it's really important that the leaders attending COP hear the voices of those who understand the importance of a good outcome to this. So Police Scotland, there'll be police officers from other parts of the UK taking part in the policing operation. They will all be under the operational command of the Chief Constable of Police Scotland, and they have been very clear about the importance of facilitating peaceful protest around the event, which in a democracy is absolutely essential.
Well, thank you very much, First Minister, for making the journey from Scotland. We wish you great success in hosting the COP meeting. We will not blame you for its failure. We know you are doing everything you can to make it a success. But it's been great to have you again.
It's always nice to be here.
And we look forward to active cooperation from Scotland as we move forward and extensive discussion on what I call the North Atlantic Arctic corridor, where modern transport, shipping and airlines bringing our people together and linking together the American market, the European market, into a market of more than 600 million people. That is what this corridor is actually doing. Thank you very much indeed. And now we welcome the Foreign Minister of Denmark.